We've now entered the central development section where Beethoven continues his magic. And I'm sure you heard how he structures each phrase of the main theme with the continual use of that repeated rhythm. And these passages outline the basic harmonies of each phrase. Then they grow softer as the music is reduced to its bare organic essence now. And we're back in the void, with the repeated fragments now in the cellos. And only that little rising scale, formerly ablaze with energy, as we move from darkness to light. But now in the central development section, it's just a whisper in the first violins. And now the flute takes flight with the main theme in the key of D major, the nature key, light and airy and shimmery. And there, just as in the first movement of the third symphony, a completely new theme appears in the development. It's a lovely, elegant theme here played by the violins as an obligato sort of over the main theme, which is in the bassoon. Hear how Beethoven's brilliant symphonic thinking has taken those little cosmic fragments from the introduction, transformed them into his main theme. But once that big diminished chord hits this one, recalling the darkness of the introduction, the music seems to lose its way and begin to disintegrate. And this dancing main theme begins to revert to its inanimate state, completely without any expression. It keeps moving, but it's like random elements of nature now, interlocking between first and second violins, and based entirely on this diminished seventh chord, like so. I mean, what is Beethoven doing here? Then it smooths out. And it finally settles here. This ecstatic sense of calm, and just a glint of that rising scale. And you recognize all of this. This is that explosive burst of light that shocked us out of the gloomy introduction. I'll play it very softly. But this is it now, coming from some vast, expansive distance.
There's another level of connecting with music, which is trying to peek into what Beethoven connected with the process of composing it. And that requires a very niche, specific curiosity on the person's part, and not everyone wants to engage in it. And that's totally fine as well.
That's the thing. I think that it depends, like you said, the curiosity of the person. I think I like to propose that the way you listen to music or enjoy art, it tells a lot about who you are, and it tells a lot about what kind of person.
Chris, you're putting everyone on the judgment plate.
Well, a little bit. I mean, it's interesting.
Go for it, yeah.
Perhaps the emotional state of where you're at too is a really good. To answer sort of your question about the curiosity of the person, or I think it's if you just need music to help you get through something in life, and that a lot of people use that, and it's fantastic for it. If you need music to stimulate you and give you ideas, or if you think of music as a way to escape from the troubles and the challenges of the world, I don't think that would really impact the way you listen to music. And some people just hear music. Some people just sort of let it go from one ear to the other, and they had a good time. Some people get really bored by classical music. But I think the thing about classical music that is sometimes makes, I think it makes live performances sometimes difficult for some audience members, is that it really has to, you have to engage with it. You can't merely, unless you listen to a lot of concerts, just sort of let it hit you and then you feel just absolutely empowered immediately, unless you have a lot of exposure to it. I think if you're an audience member that hasn't been to many concerts, these kind of shows and these documentaries, these sort of things can really help because it gives a lot of context. It's not like going to a modern day concert now and all you do is like have to stand there and you're just being blasted with sound, visuals, people dancing all over the stage, and there's graphics and everything thrown at you. I think this kind of music requires of the listener to also connect with it. You have to, it's a two-way street. And I think because of that, some people may get bored because they don't know how to engage with the music, or some people may feel like this music doesn't really relate to them. However, once you start to bridge that gap, or once you start to reach in and listen and hear those themes and hear the different colors and orchestration, and then it starts to really grow on you. You really start to understand it, and it's not something that you just consume. It's sort of like food. You can sort of consume anything, but then what about this ingredient? What about this thing and how it's cooked this way? And then the more you know, suddenly things open up and you enjoy it better.
I like your comparison with food, because definitely music of that level of complexity, like Beethoven's, is an acquired taste. There's no question about it. And it is a gourmet meal. It has the beauty and the satisfaction of that. The more you get, just like you said, the more you get into enjoying the ingredients in there and the whole, and how the ingredients connect into the whole. And so that's absolutely true. And I like how Larry is so keenly aware of that, because I want to backtrack and say something about connecting with music. Everyone definitely connects with music on different levels and in different areas and aspects, and sometimes combined, and from day to day it can change. For me personally, and I think Larry, I share it with Larry, there's one aspect of connecting with music which is of special curiosity for me, and that is the possibility to, well, of course it's imaginary, but not completely out of reality, but the possibility to connect with the thinking and emotional process of the composer himself. And
Yeah.
as Larry goes layer by layer into how that music was constructed and what went into that, like going into references in letters and from Beethoven's life, and images. Of course, the Virtual Concert Hall's team added images to that. It really grows like the roots into what predated this completely polished, beautiful product as a symphony.
We're going to replay this entire astounding passage in just a minute. You won't hear it often, as I've said. Again, this symphony is usually regarded as one of Beethoven's weaker efforts, which I think is Can I use the word insane? The vision, the technical control, the flawless sense of structure as the music moves through time, as the music deconstructs and fragments. The elements suspended and floating in space, and then they begin to coalesce, to gather power, critical mass, as it were, the mutual attraction and repulsion of chaotic matter, according to Immanuel Kant. Again, am I reading too much into this music? Listen to it again, and you decide. And now all the materials from the exposition reappear to our great benefit. But as always in the sonata allegro form, everything stays in the tonic key, here a B flat major. And the coda to this first movement, beginning with that same blazing F7 chord that started it all, and the rushing scale. And Beethoven builds his coda on the interplay of the main theme's outline between the heavens above and the earth below, entirely based on the primal tonic chord of B flat major, and a final welcome appearance of that lovely woodwind triad phrase. So gentle amidst all the heaven-storming grandeur, and it seems to be descending from the heights, very pure, down to earth. And over it, a brass fanfare, the horn fifth hovering above it all, that propels the music to its triumphant conclusion. Here is the coda. And so, when all is settled and we step back and take in the totality of this first movement and everything that surrounds it, the static, inanimate, soulless void of the introduction, those drifting fragments, and that inexplicable, solemn, liturgical phrase in the strings, and the fragments then coalesce into and if that isn't Beethoven's representation on some level of "Let there be light," which ignites the world and sets it dancing with joy, then I must be misreading things. Then again, when Beethoven said, "My world is the universe," maybe he really meant it.
I wanted to start by bringing Larry's own words. Somewhere in that short paragraph of the film, he's saying, "Oh, well, maybe I'm reading too much into this music." And I wanted to ask you, Chris, how do you feel the answers should go?
Wow, that's a very good question. Obviously, as a conductor and as someone who's studied his music very much, Larry has the right to go into this kind of detail. I think people wouldn't hesitate at all to dive into works of literature in this sort of detail, not just historically, but also philosophically. And I think this is what he's trying to hit on with this episode. It's not merely this idea that it's music, it's history, and it represents nature, but there's something philosophical about it because of the world that he lived in, especially when he talks about, he's quoting Immanuel Kant, the mutual attraction or repulsion of chaotic matter. This sort of thing doesn't just come from a study of the musical text. It comes from a lot more bigger picture. So I don't think he's reading too much. Perhaps other people may not agree. And I recently had an interesting conversation with a music lover, an audience, someone from the audience, and donors of a music organization. And she just said to me, Chris, I don't need all this information. I love how you're giving me all this context and everything, but sometimes I just want to sit back and enjoy and just listen and let it wash all over me. So for a person like that, this is probably too much, maybe too much going on. But I don't ever think it's too much. It depends on the person, and it depends on the kind of curiosity which people listen to music. Don't you think people also listen to music in different ways? Some people listen very visually, and they need to see an orchestra in order to sort of some people like to see the score. Some people like to just let it wash over them. I don't know. What do you think about? I think this, to answer your question, I think it depends on how you enjoy music, just like how you enjoy any sort of art.
I think music has enormous amount of applications to
Yeah.
use a very pedestrian word to it, but it serves so many different purposes. And for instance, I don't complain when people use music as a background, even classical music, even my own recordings as a background
mind.
for
Yeah.
driving or for cooking or doing something else, because music has that energy which creates sort of a magnetic field emotionally, and it has that whether you're listening with a huge amount of attention to it, or very little amount of attention, it still communicates with you.
I remember when I first learned this symphony. It was in the springtime. I had just turned 15 years old, and the dreamy, wistful, romantic feelings that usually surfaced around that time of year were really heightened by this exquisite second movement, the slow movement of this symphony, and its simple, intensely yearning main theme, which is essentially nothing but a descending scale in the key of E flat major, like so. With one note that reverses, but then it continues descending. That's all. What could be more basic than that? But with Beethoven, simplicity is often the basis for the sublime. And E flat major is now the tonic key of this movement. And you heard the lovely melody descending, and then it begins to ascend into the dominant key of B flat. But you may have also noticed that the texture wasn't entirely smooth and lyrical. The second violins were keeping time in a way, with a gentle but insistent clipped rhythm. Sort of a pulsation. More on that in a bit. Still, the overall character is so lovely. In fact, it recalls the popular Viennese serenade genre, which flourished under Mozart. The serenade for wind ensemble, so fashionable to accompany a late-night moonlit rendezvous under the balcony in the garden and whatnot. So often, serenades were in the mellow key of E flat major, which suited the wind instruments very well. For instance, this exquisite serenade by Mozart, which also begins with a descending scale melody in E flat major. But Beethoven's exquisite lyricism has a certain intensity to it, since that clipped rhythm that I mentioned is an essential part of the music. In fact, this second movement begins with an introductory measure of this rhythmic motive alone. And as the gorgeous main theme reaches its climax, it is crowned by this same rhythm, now played by the full orchestra, complete with trumpets and timpani and sounding very martial and majestic. So we have an unusual combination of exquisite romantic beauty and this insistent martial ceremonial fanfare motive. And that same martial rhythm now softens, and it almost breathes or pulsates along with our lovely melody.
Well, I want to just pose a question to you, Dr. Anna, after hearing all that. What do you think is the purpose of having a second movement? Because we've done the Beethoven 5, we've done the Beethoven 6, and then we're doing Beethoven 4th Symphony, and I want to ask and pose a question as to what the purpose you think, maybe philosophically, because we were talking about that previously, what's the importance or the philosophical significance of a second movement?
You mean a second movement in general for
Sorry, like an adagio slow movement. Yes, adagio slow movement.
In general, it's part of any symphonic cycle, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's a awesome question. I love it. Well, of course, we can go into the history of how the symphony as a music form developed. It wasn't created. It developed over a course of a couple of centuries.
Yeah.
As a form which fit, the performance stage of the time and fits the expectations, frankly, of the audience, and also creates a sort of a grid for the composer to lay down their ideas for the large works, making a parallel with literature. It's certain parameters which make it a novel, as opposed to a short story or some other genre in literature. And just like in any narrative, you need to kind of look at the symphony as a whole, as a structure, as basically a grid for a particular type of narrative. Just like we were talking in the previous program about the grand scope of imagery and philosophy and history and all those elements being all channeled into one long symphonic production when the composer works on the symphony. So the composer kind of decides on what they're going to write, obviously, before they put the first note on the paper. And, symphonies are larger works, take longer time, so usually composers don't write them on napkins. They plan it ahead of time and they prepare materials, just like writers of the novels. When I was a kid, I was so fascinated with writing and language and all of that, no less than with the music. And in my naive 9-year-old, I thought, okay, well, you write a novel like this, you open a notebook and you start writing it, and they just keep going. And that's it's a kind of childish perception of it, which a lot of people carry into the adulthood, and unless they try to write a novel. So, but if you do, then you find out that's not how people write a novel. They create a general idea, and then they collect materials for it, in multiple notebooks. And then they sketch the characters, then they sketch a plot of the story, and then they put it all together. And the actual writing of the words of the novel come as the last stage of creating a novel. Same with the symphony. Now back to the slow movement. The simple answer of it is any piece of art needs to represent real life, otherwise it's going to be unrelatable. And of course, one of the very big and important aspects of life, which we all live through, is variety and contrast.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So we every day or every month, if you look, if we compare a symphony to one person's year of life, if you just look back at the past year of your life, you'll have a lot of contrasts and a variety of events that happened in there. And some of them will be turbulent, some of them will be romantic, dramatic, tragic, painful, and some of them will be philosophical, kind of inward moments of maybe self-searching, however people call it. Some people call it prayer, other people call it, meditation, whatever you call it. But there's inward moments of calm, maybe calm in terms of physical and other activities, not flying the air, flights from between different countries, but just being physically reserved, but being inwardly very active and going in depth.
What is additionally significant here is that this martial rhythm has its own counterpart, like the opposite side of the coin. It's a very florid figure that's usually based on the tonic triad of E flat major, like so, which also crowns the main theme with its grandiose flourishes. This passage is very unusual. It's thrilling in the way that it sweeps you along with unison trumpets and timpani marking each beat. Yet it seems a little incongruous in the midst of this very serene and gentle music. And as the main theme continues to unfold, this florid motif develops right along with it. It embellishes the theme in the woodwinds like so. It's still very smooth and legato, but then it switches to a much livelier staccato. So we have this serene, lyrical main theme in combination with the martial rhythm, ba-bum, bum, ba-bum, which then switches to this luxuriant, flowing figure. And all of this creates a continual sense of motion and rhythmic vitality in the music. Here is the entire passage.